Hello, everybody, and welcome to our leadership luncheon today. Thank you for signing up and making it out this afternoon. So, my name is Christopher Walls, and I'll be kind of hosting today. I'm a content manager here at NetGain Technologies, and we'll also be joined by Brian Ott and Robert Ney. I am going to give us just a couple of minutes to let perhaps a few other people filter in here. I know it is 12 o'clock, but we'll probably be finishing a few minutes ahead of time anyhow. So I'm just going to give us about 2 minutes and just let some other people filter in. Again, thank you for coming out and joining us today. We'll have a few polls throughout the webinar as well. You should see those when we get to them. You should see them just come right up on your screen. There'll be an interactive poll. One's a simple yes or no question. The other one has a few the different responses that you could give. And we're just curious to hear what you think about some staffing issues that we're going to be talking about. All right. I think looks like one other person did filter in here. I think we'll go ahead and get started here instead of waiting too much longer. So again, if you didn't hear, my name is Christopher Walls, content manager at NetGain, and I'll kind of be hosting and mediating today. So we will go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be taking a look at IT staffing issues. I'm sure if you found yourself here, you have probably run into some of these either at your organization or just reading about it out there in whatever sort of content you might be taking in. We're going to be specifically asking how can managed IT services help solve these, but not from a whole operations point of view, right? How can managed IT services be used to augment an existing IT team? Because we absolutely understand that you probably have an IT staff, be it just one person or a few people on board already that you are uh, happy with and that you want to retain, right? And that's absolutely fine. And somebody like uh, managed services can come in and help support those people instead of just completely taking over the show. So to take a step back really quick and introduce ourselves before we get too into this. NetGain overall is a managed service provider based out of Lexington, Kentucky, although we have offices throughout the Southeast and Midwest in Chattanooga, Tennessee, St. Louis, Louisville, Kentucky, Cincinnati, Ohio, Little Rock, Arkansas. So we're really focused on that southeastern portion of the United States. So today what we'll be talking about is kind of broken up into two sections. The first section is staff augmentation models, or at least a few of them that we see a lot. There's lots of ways that you could potentially go about this, and how do you actually bring in an MSP to help boost up your existing staff. We're going to be looking at three specific models that are probably some of the most common, certainly that we see. And then for the second half of our presentation, we're going to be talking about, frankly, why would you do this? What benefits does it have? What sort of pain points could it help you solve that you're probably experiencing now around IT staffing? So before we actually get into everything, let's actually introduce ourselves. I've already spoken a bit and probably too much already about who I am, my title, and all that. But Brian, if you would like to introduce yourself for a moment.
Sure, I'm Brian Ott. I've been in the information technology world for well over 25 years, so kind of dating myself there a little bit. But I'm based in our NetGain's Chattanooga office. I primarily am dealing on the managed services side in highly regulated industries, banking, healthcare, CMMC compliant organizations. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And Robert.
Yeah, I'm Robert Ney. Very excited to be here. I've been in the managed service space for a little bit over 15 years, and like Brian, focused a lot on regulated industries, whether that be financial, healthcare, and manufacturing. And really excited to be here as well.
Great, thanks, guys. Yeah, so between the two of you all, there's what, 40 years almost? But yeah, over 40 years of IT experience, and specifically business IT experience. I guess we should make that point clear. Both highly experienced consultants. So I appreciate you guys joining us today. And moving on, we'll actually start off with one of our polls that I mentioned earlier. So we're curious, have you hired, or has your organization, maybe your specific role is not involved in hiring, but has your organization hired for an IT role in the past 3 years? And you should see that poll coming up on your screen in just a moment. And you should see that now, actually. So I'll just give a couple seconds, couple minute or so to respond. I predict that this is going to be a resounding yes. If you have any sort of IT need, you probably know that turnover is one of the largest problems facing IT staffing. It is certainly a high turnover area of business, and can also be quite costly. It looks like we have most everybody has responded, and 67% yes. So actually, that's kind of lower than I predicted, honestly. I would be interested to hear if you haven't hired, or your organization hasn't hired for IT in the past 3 years. Is that because you just don't have an IT department, which would make sense, or have you stuck with the same IT staff for that long? So we'll go ahead and close that and get back to our presentation. So as I said, we're breaking this into two parts, and the first part here is augmentation models. What can this look like? And the first one we're going to talk about is end user support, or tier 1 help desk. And I have some interesting little factoids here that we dug up. Tier 1 issues, this actually comes from a Gartner report. Tier 1 issues account for about 70% of all help desk tickets. Now, tier 1 issues, that's kind of a technical term. If you're not, in the IT services landscape, you may not really know exactly what falls into a tier 1 problem. And it can be different, depending on who's delivering those services, where your help desk, is. But generally, these are your everyday lowest level issues for the most part. Things like password resets, simple application updates or patches. We're not talking about things like massive cybersecurity updates or anything like that, but just your simple everyday updates and application installation and configuration. And it's also just user support. How do I use this application? So that's typically what's going to fall into a tier 1. But Gartner found that 70% of all calls to business help desks ended up being a tier 1 problem. So they make up a massive amount of time that your IT team is spending on these things. Another piece of information I found that I thought was really interesting is it was from a Forrester report that estimated that a single password reset can cost around $70. And they surveyed, there was over 1,000 businesses from all different sizes, small, medium, and enterprise level businesses. And they took into account the time spent on this, the total employee cost of the people sent to actually do these password resets. But, frankly, these are just clicking a few buttons, right? And sending an email to the end user to confirm the password. I mean, we've all had password resets, right? I don't need to walk through that. We all know what that's like. But $70 on average per password reset. That's can get quite expensive, especially as your end user base grows. And we all know that people lock themselves out of their computers. I have, right? So I think we probably all have. But I found those pretty interesting. But I'm gonna throw it to Robert. And how can a managed services partner kind of come in and help with these tier one issues? What does that look like when you enter into a partnership, but want to still retain maybe something like a network engineer or a cybersecurity engineer that you already have on staff, but you don't want them spending all this time dealing with password resets?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Chris. That's when trying to decide how you want to augment to your staff and the company you want to partner with. There's 1,000 different ways to skin that cat, but one of the more popular ways is to keep your skilled network engineers that you have on site doing a lot more beneficial tasks for the business and leaving that 70% tier one issues to a partner. I think it was about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I saw our numbers and it was a little bit over 80% of all issues coming inbound were tier one issues, whether that be password reset or just a simple issue with email or your core application that you're using. So if you're able to partner with an outside company and offset all of those remedial tasks, it allows your in-house engineers, network engineers, to focus on a lot more impact-driven technologies. So you're able to let them focus on the core application that's driving your business and allow those day-to-day password resets, quick issues that they learned 10 years ago to go to a partner so that they can be resolved quickly and let your core engineers focus on, again, big impact items. Their core applications typically would be where you'd want to have them spend their time.
Right. And, ideally, this sort of partnership would be fairly seamless, where you could still pick up the phone and call whoever that tier one help desk partner is, right? And also ideally, they know your business quite well, right? They're not a huge tier one help desk shop, right? We certainly know of things out there where you can offshore this sort of work. That's certainly a possibility, but ideally, these engineers, these tier one engineers, are really extensions of your team and not some other company that you have to call and deal with their call trees and all of this sort of thing, right? So that's really the ideal focus with this sort of staff augmentation model that, in our opinion, MSPs should be striving for. But that's certainly one of the most common ways of modeling the staff augmentation. And I find it interesting. You said 80%, Robert, from what you can tell of service desk tickets are tier one tickets. I would be curious to see how even out of those other 20%, how many still involved a tier one level line item.
Right.
Even if the whole thing, it's probably quite high, right?
It's higher. Yep, you're exactly
So,
right.
I don't have that in front of me, but it would be something
No,
interesting to.
you're spot on with that. And another thing that reminded me of there was with your internal team, if they're getting constantly interrupted with tier one issues, the challenge is, let's say they are implementing a new core application or implementing the latest QuickBooks for accounting. While they're trying to do that project, if they're getting constantly interrupted with, hey, I need my password reset, or hey, my monitor is not working, my second monitor, it keeps flickering, can you help me? Those little interruptions, while they can be quickly resolved and they're not, let's say, a paramount issue, but what they do is they extend the time and project time it would take to implement the latest accounting software or a new application that you're utilizing. So it goes from having a project that should take 1 week end up taking 3 weeks or into a month because these tier one issues keep interrupting. And I know if I get interrupted while I'm trying to do one task, it takes me another 30 minutes to level set and get back at it.
Right. So, and there's also the question of scalability in a way where if your business is growing and you're adding more end users, there's going to be more password resets. There's going to be more, hey, I found out that I really do need to have Adobe Creative Suite installed. Can you install that for me? And through no fault of your engineer, who is probably fantastic, right? Through no fault of their own, like Robert just said, a project that should be maybe a few weeks or a month has suddenly blown up to be 2 months. So, and you've already paid for that software for them to install it and get it operational. So it's just sitting there unused yet paid for, which always seems like the worst possible situation. So,
Exactly.
well, let's go ahead and move on a bit. So that's probably the most common staff augmentation model that I have seen since being in the MSP industry, because it really takes away those everyday worries, right, from your team and lets them focus on something that is probably going to drive your business strategy forward, rather than having to essentially do cleanup sort of activities every day. But let's take a look at another way that an IT provider, IT partner could help out, and that's with monitoring and proactive maintenance. We like to use the phrase proactive maintenance because it's a process that should be monitoring your network for issues before they really even impact your IT systems, right? And they're going out there and finding these things and taking care of them before they have really any bottom line impact on you at all. Uh, this often requires 24/7 monitoring, and even though there's probably not a person actively looking at a screen 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it does require the software needed to facilitate that, right? So typically, proactive maintenance, as we see it, involves things like patch management, which this is a bit different than just simply updating your line of business applications, like your everyday applications. This is actually creating a patch schedule and making sure that patches aren't going to interfere with anything else in your IT environment, which can be a huge issue if you don't have that plan for. It also includes backup and critically backup testing. I've heard a lot of our engineers use the phrase that if you're not testing your backups regularly, then you don't have backups, right? Even if you are performing them, if you're not testing them weekly or monthly, then you don't really have backups because they're not dependable. And it also could include something like end of life device planning or software planning. So if you know that you're going to be phasing out, a group of devices like some laptops or mobile devices, or even a piece of software if it's going through its end of life phase, then this monitoring can help you plan for that to make sure that when those things exit your IT system, your IT environment, that it's not going to have any long-lasting impacts. And there's a plethora of reasons why you might want to do this. I already spoke on a few of them, but I think really the biggest one is that it finds issues before they really become expensive problems that you then have to fix. So, Brian, I'll throw it to you. And I know you've worked with a few clients in the past that have a proactive maintenance partnership where they may retain even a few tier one technicians, in their staff, and even an engineer, but they really need help with that constant monitoring and reporting to really give those on-site, on-staff people the information that they need. So could you talk a little bit about just what that would look like, how that partnership tends to play out?
Sure. I mean, there's several different ways that it can work. But I've got to say that the remote monitoring and management is really the unsung hero of the MSP world. If we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing, you never think about it, never have to worry about it, never hear about it. In a lot of cases, the advantages of this and working with your full-time team is that it takes, and again, this is like the tier one help desk, instead of them having to focus on deploying patches to operating systems or upgrading firmware at your edge on your firewalls and your switches, we have a programmatic solution that goes through a change management process where we test the patches, we push them out seamlessly. You don't see any disruption in your business because we're doing it all behind the scenes and doing it proactively. Another issue is with the proactive monitoring. If something pops up at 2 a.m. in the morning, instead of you coming into work at 8 a.m. and finding your network down and none of the batch jobs have processed overnight, and now your ERP is backed up and you're not going to be able to ship product, or your transactions didn't process, we'll have eyes on glass at 2 a.m. and escalate that issue to where it needs to be escalated so that the problem is resolved and the business disruption is minimal. Same thing with patch management, evaluating patches to your core software applications, ensuring that there's not going to be a problem, because we all know we've all had the problem where on a Microsoft Patch Tuesday, we went ahead and did it right away, and whoopsie, Microsoft may have had a little mistake. So we'll evaluate and make sure that the impacts are there. A good MSP will have a good patch management plan. They'll have a remediation plan in place, so if something does go wrong, they can roll it back immediately, and that kind of falls back in with the backups and testing your backups. And how, again, I have to reiterate, it's kind of the unsung hero. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes, but if we're doing it right, you never see it. Everything just works.
Right. Yeah, and that would be the ideal situation, right? Especially for something like a maintenance and monitoring partnership, where it's really more about informing your existing staff and giving them the power that they need to actually fix issues.
Right, and we can do reporting and analysis on network and traffic and software usage and where we see bottlenecks, and be able to provide that so that management and the IT department can make informed decisions on where to invest technology dollars and where to invest time going forward.
Right. And that's I think it's just the key point overall throughout this whole presentation that we're giving today, is that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing sort of situation. We understand that not every business can have a full spectrum IT team where they have network engineers, they have field services people, and cybersecurity people, right? There are ways to retain those staff that are loyal and that you have worked with for years now, and they've proven themselves, right? But you need those gaps filled in, right? So it's not an all or nothing thing. I think that's maybe a bit of a misconception in the MSP world overall. But let's go ahead and push on here. And we'll look at our third model that we wanted to take a look at of how staff augmentation could work. And that gets to the security question. And cybersecurity is always a popular topic. People seem to latch onto it quite a bit whenever we talk about it. It tends to get a bit of engagement and buzz around it. I think people, like the idea. I mean, not like the idea, but they are intrigued by the idea of hackers and all this sort of stuff, which are very real, but that's a conversation for another time. And we have done and probably will do more in the future, webinars like this and such on them. But we and MSPs in general can offer what we call a security operations center, right? Sometimes you might hear that be referred to as a security help desk. Somewhat similar terms. Different places may use those differently or interchangeably, but essentially it is an augmentation model where your organization relies on the MSP for security expertise. And security expertise can be, frankly, some of the most expensive talent to find out there. We've seen numbers out there around, even in central Kentucky, where I'm located. A mid-level, mid-career security engineer could be $120,000 salary on, right? And that's probably even on the low end now, if I'm being honest. And depending on where you are and things like that, that could even rise higher. If you're involved in hiring these sorts of people, I'm sure you've seen that already. So it can be quite costly, especially if cybersecurity is something that you're concerned about, but it's not something that you can find the dollars for for like a full-time position. A couple of pieces of information, a couple of like factoids here, I guess, that have stuck out to me recently. Uh, there's a ransomware. If ransomware attack occurs every 11 seconds, which for those, if you haven't heard of ransomware, it's a type of malicious software that when you open it and it's installed on your system, it can shut down maybe your whole computer, or even your whole network of computers, or maybe specific applications within them. There are different ways to go about doing it, but they are quite literally held ransom until you make some sort of financial transaction with the person who is doing this, or group, very often, not maybe not a single individual, but the group who is doing this. And very often it's incredibly expensive, and they tend to know quite a bit about your business at this point. So they select a price point that they know is outrageous but payable for your business, so that they're not going to be asking $3 billion, right, from a small business, but they may ask for 1 million or 2 million, which could still be absolutely crippling, of course. So Robert, I know, well, all of us honestly here at NetGain are pretty involved in cybersecurity, but Robert, I know cybersecurity is a point of focus for you, and you've worked with security operations centers and the security help desk in the past. What's that look like? How is a security focused team different than, for example, like the tier one end user team that you spoke about previously?
Yes, yeah. So this isn't going to direct your end user specifically. And unfortunately, at times it can feel a lot like purchasing insurance. It is something that you have to do, but isn't you don't see an ROI on it very quickly. However, in my experience here, I have seen multiple law firms, several healthcare practices, a couple manufacturers just in the past 5 years get hit with ransomware. And the challenge that all of them faced were they invested money in antivirus. They bought whatever was getting marketed to them the most, or their local MSP said would be the latest and greatest. So they invest in an antivirus, or they invest in a firewall, and those are implemented. The challenge is those software and hardware can be really great at monitoring. It can be really great at prevention. But where the rubber really hits the road and the challenge occurs for the client is, okay, we've paid for all this prevention. We've paid for all the antivirus to hopefully catch something before it comes onto our network. However, what happens once it's onto our network? As this slide says, every 11 second a ransomware attack occurs. So unfortunately, that means that all of our networks are getting hit daily. I think it's something like one out of every 162 emails is malicious in nature. So with that said, your network's constantly getting attacked. And at some point, unfortunately, some of us will experience that a successful attack. So then this is where the SOC comes into play. So you've bought all the software and the hardware to prevent. Now the prevention has done great, but it's only done 99% great. That 1% finally got in. There's a virus on your network. What happens? If the dirty secret behind all of these software companies, in my opinion, is that that's it. They prevent, and then once the attack occurs, best case scenario, they alert you that an attack has occurred, and then that's it. there's nothing else that happens. So it's essentially saying, hey, your wallet's been stolen. Not doing anything about it. I just wanted to let you know you no longer have your wallet. It's not really great. It's a bit frustrating. And so what a SOC does is it has live eyes onto that issue. The issue occurs, the team is alerted. So now they can make the appropriate actions to isolate, mitigate, and reduce the impact of whatever that attack might be. So when you're looking at selecting a partner, you want to make sure you're selecting a partner that not only has the staff to handle tier 1 issues or handle the proactive maintenance like Brian talked about, but also has a dedicated staff separate from the reactive tier 1 or the maintenance and management staff that is focused solely on the security aspect of your environment. Does that make sense?
It does. I think a really important piece that you just spoke about, Robert, is how nothing is truly impenetrable. No single solution is completely foolproof in the cybersecurity world. And I think any talented cybersecurity engineer would say that same thing, right? Where your best defense is always trying to layer these things. But even then, even with a layered defense, it's not impenetrable. Something can happen, and over time, frankly, something probably will happen. And
Right.
it's really about that response. And I think the response key, the response part is key there, where you have to get the idea out of your head that, okay, we're totally safe now. This is never going to happen. We're fine. We're just going to keep going about our day. I mean, hopefully that is most of the time, right? But you have to be prepared for that inevitability when something does happen, when something does make it through, and having the expertise to fall back on of, how do we recover from this technically, right? And also how do we approach it from a cost point of view, like what have we actually lost here? What sort of danger that we get ourselves into? I think it is certainly key. So thank you, Robert. That we're actually going to move into the second half of the presentation here, and but before that, I would like to ask a second question. So, how long do you think it takes to fill an open IT role on average? This can encompass everything from a tier 1 technician to a senior cybersecurity engineer. But I'm curious, how long do you think this takes to fill an open IT role on average? And you should see that poll coming up on your screen in just a moment. You should see it now. We have a couple of different options here, ranging from just a few days to a bit over a month to everything in between. We'll give it a couple minutes here for people to answer. And when I dug this up, it was pretty shocking to me. I actually thought it was going to be a bit lower. And actually, the thing that I pulled this from had a breakdown of different sorts of roles within a common business, sales, marketing, administrative, technical IT, right? And it showed the differences between them. It looks like most people have answered, and actually we have a pretty even split between the 3 highest options. But the correct answer is 44 days. On average, it takes 44 days from opening an IT role to actually having that filled. That is actually 2 to 3 days above sales and marketing. And that also includes senior level sales and marketing people, and something like 9 or 10 days, I believe it was, above administrative roles. So that struck me, and it's only a few days less than senior leadership level. So it takes quite a while to fill these IT positions, and I think it becomes even more of an issue when you realize how much of your business relies on your IT environment working and being safe. 44 days can be quite a while. So what we want to look at for the last couple of minutes here is why would you do this, right? Why would you engage in this sort of staff augmentation model, right? What can it do for you? What sort of problems can it directly address? And I've actually pulled a couple of indirect quotes, I think, from Robert and Brian, just talking to them over the past couple of weeks, getting ready for this. And one thing that Brian actually said, probably about a week or so ago, is that it's great to manage contracts and not people. And I thought that was just an interesting turn of phrase. But Brian, what do you mean by that? Like, what are you getting at when you say that it's great to manage a contract and not a team?
Well, through the lens of this discussion, essentially what it means is that you basically set your objectives for your service delivery and everything where you need it for your IT, and you rely on your partner to manage the folks that are delivering that service. In this case, it'd be your MSP, as opposed to, if your business is scaling up, having to spend that 44 days to go find a network engineer. I don't know what business owner has that kind of time to delay and wait. Or another big one, a big problem that we see, and we see this all the time, and I'm sure Robert can agree with this, is that you have an on-site resource and he's great and he keeps everything running, and then he leaves and he takes a boatload of institutional knowledge with him in his head that you can't recover. If you're using an MSP, we've got policies, procedures, documentation, and staff turnover is really not an issue because the institutional knowledge stays in one place. Another good factor with this is that if you've got a contract, you've also got a static cost. And you can budget and you can plan on what your costs are going to be. If you suddenly find yourself without a solutions engineer for your IT infrastructure and you have problems, you're going to be basically shoveling money at somebody to try to get them to come in and fix your problems right away. And using a good MSP, if you have a problem, we can scale it and your costs are predictable, they're static. You can keep your CFO happy, you can keep your bottom line happy, and not have to worry about the intangibilities of people coming and going and hiring, or in the case of a seasonal decline or something along those lines, having to lay people off, which is also a painful process and can be very expensive. Using a good MSP, we can scale to meet your needs as you need it, and fill the holes.
That idea of institutional knowledge is really key. I think, if your IT partner, your MSP has been around for a while, frankly, they've probably seen everything under the sun, right? They've probably seen organizations that are very similar to yours. They've probably seen a lot of and solved a lot of the same problems that you're facing. And I think that's really key because if you're trying to do all this in-house, you have to find somebody out there that you hope has seen your sort of problems and can solve your sort of problems. And like Brian said, that often comes down to just shoveling a whole lot of money at these people and then maybe still not filling the position in 44 or 54 plus days or something like that. And like you said, waiting around that long is not an option sometimes. But we're gonna push on a bit to keep our mind on the time here. But let's see here, Robert. I've heard you mention a few times about how these sorts of partnerships can help you focus on your core business. I think you even actually mentioned this earlier in the presentation today, and how you can focus on your core app, right? And I think your turn of phrase is focus on the core app, not the crap, is the actual phrase. I saved us from writing that on this slide. But what do you mean by that though? Like, what are you getting at when you say that?
Yes, yeah. So essentially exactly that. I love that phrase that you wrote down for me. But it really is letting the your in-house expertise focus on that core application and let your executives not have to focus on the tier one issues, the rudimentary things of how your network's being monitored or password resets or your employees having downtime. I really want the executives to be able to focus on what is the way that we can use technology to drive our business forward and make it a competitive advantage. And one of the ways that a good partner can do that is through documentation. So a lot of the times, in-house teams can have challenges keeping up with asset inventory, keeping up with the documentation of where your hardware and software is today and where it's going to go and where you want it to align with your business of tomorrow. So as your business scales, what does that mean for your in-house hardware? What does it mean for the software that you're going to use? Are you going to keep it on-prem, or do you want to move it to the cloud, or do you want to have some sort of hybrid approach? Having the right partner to give you that documentation and actual data behind how your networks performed the past month, the past quarter, really gives the executives the ability to make an informed decision on what they want to do with their investment in technology and making sure that they align it with the business goals.
Great. Thank you. Before we move on, I did want to actually bring attention to the questions panel. For those of you in attendance, if you look over on your GoToWebinar menu selection, you should see a section that says questions. We will have a Q&A at the end of this. We've had a couple come in already, but I just want to go ahead and call attention to that. If you do have a question, you can drop down that menu and type it to us, and we'll get to those at the end. So I just want to give some brief attention to that in case anything has popped up that you are curious about. But the final piece of, sorry about that, clicked ahead one too many slides there. But the final piece of kind of unsolicited quote that I took from these guys was from Brian about facing the unknown. And it's that whole question of you don't know what you don't know, and that can sometimes be scary. So what do you mean by that in terms of partnership with an IT partner, Brian?
Well, I mean, there's lots of different meanings here. You know, in the present time, a lot of times your internal staff doesn't have the time, the resources to do the analysis and reporting of your infrastructure as it exists today. So you don't know if you're getting the optimum efficiency out of it, if it's being utilized to its fullest potential, if there's problems or issues that are inherent in your system that just aren't apparent yet. So that is helpful. And, you know, looking forward to the future, who knows what threats, changes, issues are coming. 10 years ago, who'd have thought that you could put your entire infrastructure in the cloud and not require a server on premise at all to do what you're doing today in the cloud? Same thing as who thought that there would be ransomware as a service, where there's actually cyber criminals out there selling tools to attack businesses like yours. One of the nice things with a good MSP partner is that they're always forward looking. They're always checking the landscape for new technology, new tools, new threats, vectors of attack. There's just, you know, there's people who are just dedicated to staying up night, making sure that we're trying to stay 1 to 2 steps ahead of the bad actors out there, and also ensuring that our customers have access to the latest and greatest technology that can help their business and their technology align to achieve their strategic goals.
Great, thanks, Brian. So as I said, we do have a few questions that have come in, and that closes us out for what we wanted to talk about in terms of things that we prepared today. But we've had, it looks like, about 3 questions come in, and I would like to again point out to the questions panel if anybody in attendance has anything that you'd like to ask us, please feel free, and we will answer those once we get through a couple of these. But let's see here. Let's see, Robert. Well, whoever wants to can take this one. But someone has asked, how long does onboarding take? So after you've signed a deal or whatever the case is, how long does it take to really get up and running?
Okay, so when you decide to partner with a certain managed service provider, typically it's going to take around 30 days. And of course, this is subjective to the solution that you put in place, the size and scope of your organization. But on average, it's going to be about 30 days before you're fully onboarded and the solution is implemented. If it's going with the tier one, sort of like we began with, like I discussed at the beginning, that's definitely going to be 30 days. And on that 30th day, you should be able to make a call. Your end user should be able to make a call and speak to a member of the team that you just partnered with. And the same could be said with Brian with the monitoring as well. About 30 days to get the agents on all of the different servers and endpoints that are in the environment.
Great, thank you. And let's see here. How easily can staff augmentation scale as my business grows?
Well, I mean, that's one of the beauties of it. If you're with a good partner, for instance, if you've got 100, excuse me, sorry, 100 help desk agents, we're not utilizing 100% of them all the time for every client. So as your business grows, we can allocate resources to support your business and scale that as quickly as possible, or scale it down as, if we find that the needs aren't there, that your employees are quite capable and don't have issues and don't utilize the help desk as much, we can scale it down. But more importantly, as your business grows and we add users, add capabilities, add systems, we can scale up to meet your needs.
Great, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. And then finally, at least so far, this is the final question that we have. How is the security help desk different than a normal help desk?
I'll take this one, Brian. Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think there really needs to be when you're partnering with a strong managed service provider, there's going to be a big delineation between the guys that are answering the day-to-day issues that your business is having, and then having a separate team that's dedicated to focusing on the security of your network, the data that's moving in and outside of your network, and ensuring that that is within the normal confines of your business and not malicious.
Great. Well, let me check the questions panel. 1 second, see if anything has come in. Let's see, looks like, nope, no, nothing new. Well, I would like to thank everybody that's come out and you listened to us on what's probably your lunch hour today. Appreciate that. If you have any questions for us at all, there actually will be a survey after you close down the webinar today. We'll just ask a few questions about if you found this educational or informative or fun in any way. And there's also a question there for if you would like to speak with us, we can get in contact with you pretty soon. So thank you again for coming out and sharing your lunchtime with us. And I hope that some of this was informative and might help you in figuring out how to solve some IT staffing problems that you may be facing. So thanks again. Again, my name is Christopher Walls, and we were with Brian Ott and Robert Ney. Thanks again for your all's time as well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.